Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Moving on, we are going to be talking about the San Antonio Spurs, who put out a report yesterday that the team considers everyone other than Victor Wembanyama and Devin Vassell as touchable, as a piece that they would be willing to move off of, as last year we saw the flashes of Victor Wembanyama and how much of a bright future he has in the NBA for years to come, and yet they were still one of the worst teams in the NBA at 22-60. There were only a few teams worse than them this year, and again, some things to build off of. I especially thought that the on-ball creation of Devin Vassell was something that maybe didn't know if that was going to ever fully form with him. Going back to his time at Florida State, he was viewed a little bit more of a catch-and-shoot role guy, and he showed that he has on-ball skills and that he can be a little bit more of a combo guard. But that being said, the Spurs need to go out and find a legitimate point guard to help keep that offense together. They were running way too many minutes of Jeremy Sochan at the point guard, who Sochan is somebody who I never really liked coming into the NBA, and then as opposed to some of, other people in the media, their perceptions on him. And then this year, he started getting a ton of run at point guard, and everybody absolutely hated him. So I feel like I'm probably somewhere in the middle. He's not my favorite player. He's not somebody I would look to highlight on my offense. Maybe he does have some sort of value and can be a piece of this Spurs team moving forward, but the idea of playing him at point guard, and the Spurs quickly realized that was a massive mistake. So I'm not sure exactly what the option is for them. I'm sure they're going to be looking in the draft in terms of trying to find somebody who can fit alongside the two guys they already have. We know the reputation surrounding the 2024 draft, that there isn't any high-end star talent, but there could be, some potential glue guys and key role players. The Spurs obviously need a little bit more than that. Now, a name that I thought was potentially interesting for them in terms of someone who could run some point guard minutes for them, Nikola Topic. It was just announced earlier today that he has a torn ACL. He was doing a combine in Italy, and he is probably going to miss the majority of, if not the entire 2024-25 season. So that is probably a little bit off the table. Now, if the Spurs loved him, they could still take him, but that's not an immediate answer, and I feel like that's probably something they want to jump on. I would imagine that's their number one priority this offseason, is trying to get a legitimate point guard option. Now, Reed Sheppard is somebody that I have been a very big fan of. Now, there are some concerns in terms of, can he be a full-time starting point guard? You have Devin Vassell, who does have this past year's experience of doing a little bit more ball handling himself. I think that between Reed Sheppard and Devin Vassell, again, maybe that's not the high-end, point guard that you want to pair Victor Wembanyama with long term, but I do think that there's real upside with Reed Sheppard, and I would be curious to see. I think that Sheppard and Vassell can play off of one another very well if they were put into a system. Again, Reed Sheppard is somebody that I feel like has some sneaky upside as a number one ball handler, but can also fit in just about any system because of the fact that he hasn't been ball dominant through his young career, specifically his freshman season at Kentucky, and the way that he can sort of mold himself into a variety of different spots, something that I would definitely be interested in. But outside of that, I will say I'm a pretty big fan of Keldon Johnson for the Spurs. He is the forward that they drafted in the first round a few years ago, and I do really like his two-way ability. So I think it did take me a little bit sort of to come around to the idea of Devin Vassell being a more untouchable player in comparison to Keldon Johnson. Now, eventually I did come around, but Johnson is somebody that if I'm the Spurs, I would probably like to retain. He averaged 22 points per game last season before taking on a smaller role. Or he averaged 22 points per game in 22-23, I should say. Last season took on a reduced role, and we saw the overall numbers drop a little bit, but his three-point efficiency is something that we have seen, be an effective part of his game in the past. He shot 40% from three on 5 attempts per game in the 2021-22 season. Last year had a little bit of a rebound in comparison to 22-23, but again, I feel like I'm just saying a lot of numbers right now. Point being, I think that he is a 3-and-D player who could fit in well with with what the Spurs are trying to build, especially considering the fact that their defense was horrendous last year. Obviously, the numbers with Victor Wembanyama on the court made them a lot better, but at the same time, the point of attack defenders is definitely a concern with the Spurs. So Keldon Johnson is somebody who I think can sort of play into their situation in the long term. And, it's going to be interesting to see how the Spurs, like I mentioned, as much as I like Reed Shepherd and maybe there are some other players out there as well, Stephon Castle, he believes that he is a point guard. A lot of NBA GMs consider him as more of a wing. That's sort of what he played into when he was at at Connecticut last season. But his high school background is being a point guard, and maybe there is something there. But as much as, you can go through the different options, there really isn't a can't-miss prospect in this draft. They have the number 4 and number 8 picks, where they can maybe try and go with one more upside prospect and one a little bit safer. But there's also a very real possibility that, again, as much as there isn't a can't miss, getting 2 picks in the top 8 could be tempting for some of these teams that are a little bit in the middle ground. Now, the Spurs have gone out and said that they are not interested in bringing Trae Young to San Antonio. Probably a player, as much as he's a good talent, they don't want to disrupt the development of Victor Wembanyama. Trae is somebody who needs the ball in his hands a lot. That's still something that, and doesn't really play off ball very much at all. Wemby is somebody who can create on the ball for himself as well, and I'm sure that's not something they want to take away from. As much as they want to be a better team next season, it is not that they are in total desperation mode to, make the playoffs. It's about trying to put Victor Wembanyama in the best possible position to succeed. And there are a lot of steps that are sort of in the way of that. But let me know what your hopes, expectations are for the Spurs in this upcoming offseason. But we are going to be taking our final break of the show here. When we come back on the other side, we've been talking some hypotheticals, but we do have something solidified of Christian McCaffrey signing a contract extension with the San Francisco 49ers. So we are going to be breaking down the details of that deal and what it means for the team as a whole. We will be right back after this quick break.